Progress.
Okay, thank you and welcome to our October 24th, 2022 2 o'clock working session meeting. Please let the record reflect that all three commissioners are present and our executive management team, and we have been joined by Ashley and our judge. If you guys want to just state your names and titles for the record, that would be great.
Julie McKay, I'm the current presiding judge for Superior Court.
And I'm the court administrator, Ashley Cowan.
Very good. Okay, I'll let you guys, well, I guess, Gary, I'll let you start and then we'll go from there.
Madam Commissioner, thank you, commissioners. We're here this afternoon to continue our series of budget workshops, and this is the last set of meetings that we're going to have with the departments concerning their capital budget requests, their supplemental requests. And as you noted, we have Superior Court here today. They denoted in their supplemental request for 2023 $1,175,000 for a 13th courtroom construction. So with that, I'll let Judge McKay take it over.
And I know that you have our supplemental request, so I don't know how much information that you need from the judges, but the supplemental request was to have the 13th judge funded, which is the half of the salary for that judge, as well as the salary for the judicial assistant and a court reporter. Obviously, the bigger, at least from my perspective, problem is there's no spot in the county courthouse currently that has been set aside for a 13th judge. The supplemental was the size that it was because of the unknowns with regards to construction. And that was the lower, I believe, lower half, if I'm remembering how we outlined it, the lower half of that budget was for the construction costs, which frankly, we don't really have the ability to get that information other than more of an estimate. The other part of the supplemental budget is also a request for an IT individual. Superior Court is dealing with IT issues on a regular basis, and so we would like to have somebody specifically designated to the Superior Court. There are 20 judicial officers as well as staff for all of them. Obviously, the clerks are in our courtrooms having the same types of problems that we do with connectivity and being able to make sure all of our access to the public through Zoom is successful. And on a regular basis, I am not successful. But the request would be to have then an IT person directly appointed to the Superior Court for those issues. I am missing something.
And the other requests were just M&O increases to deal with the cost of papers going up, all of those types of things.
As far as your IT request goes, following you this afternoon, we do have IT in here. And I reviewed with them their presentation today, and part of that presentation deals with how they are going to deal with the court systems and their staffing levels for customer service in IT.
And we are aware that district court has their own IT person that gets budgeted to them directly, and they have a much smaller staff than we do, so I'm not quite sure why they would have someone individually versus the Superior Court. But I don't want to take anything away from district court, but use that kind of as a point of comparison. The need is just as great, if not greater, in Superior Court.
Well, that was actually going to be one of my questions, is what other departments do we have specifically IT staff for versus what departments do we not? Because I didn't know we actually had that. I haven't.
Neither.
So
Yeah, we don't have that.
I think there are a good handful that we've kind of decentralized in the past, so to speak. District Court being one, Sheriff's Office, Community Services, Prosecutor's Office. I think the question that I'm hopeful that we can look at in the future is, does that model make sense as we look toward future technology improvements? Or do we need to look at centralization and pull those that are in other departments back into the IT family, so to speak, but designate them to specific groups, similar to what we see with the prosecutor's office with their attorneys in civil, right? I have a designated attorney for HR, for risk management, who is my go-to. They still roll up under the centralized office so that they have access to each other's work. They know what systems work together, what don't, access levels, but that hasn't historically always been what's happened happened at the county. It looks like it's kind of been piecemealed, who needs what and what gets approved where. So I'm hopeful as we look toward future positions, we really have a good strategy in place as to are we looking at centralization or decentralization in a lot of those support services like IT, like finance, like budget. There's a lot of the questions we have out there right now is what does this need to look like in the future? You guys definitely need the support. My question is, do we start looking at bringing it back into a group that has the expertise where we could also then cross-train, right? And you have within that IT group bodies that you can cross-train into district court and superior court, into the BOCC office and HR. But these are really big philosophical discussions I think we're gonna have to make, especially as we start looking at the ERP.
Yeah, and I would say that some of that was going on, you know, because when I was over at the auditor's office, I mean, they definitely had certain people that were assigned to elections, you know, just because of the needs and elections. It wasn't a staff for them, but that's who you called from IT when you had issues. So, I mean, I think that's not a new concept, you know, but, you know, something that maybe, you know, that's why I said I didn't realize that certain departments had specific IT people, so.
I think when we started seeing people leave the county, and maybe under previous leadership, they weren't filling the positions as quickly as maybe the departments had hoped. The department started then pulling them into their own departments. So I'd say in the last few years, when I looked at the head count from what IT used to be versus what it is now, but then I looked at across the whole campus, it appears, and again, I haven't done a lot of the work, but it appears that as positions weren't filled in the IT office, they were then filled in the individual offices around the county. So I hear what you're saying. I just think it might have been a workaround when the positions weren't getting filled in the main office like they had hoped. Kevin will speak to this today. That's part of his conversation, like Gary said. But definitely, you know, I think there's been some things in the last couple of years that has changed maybe the way that it was structured in the past. Okay.
So Judge McKay, let's get back to the original premise of the 13th courtroom.
Yes.
If you had a preference, where would that courtroom be located?
Well, where we asked for it in 2006, which would have been the second floor across from family law. That, I think, ship has sailed. So at this point in time, then we would take space on I think you've gotten the letter that I sent with regards to here's what our suggestions were, because I did not come with suggestions, because I didn't think that I would impose upon or presume that I could ask the county or tell the county BOCC where this should be. But bottom line, the suggestions start with clearing all non-judicial entities out of the courtroom and starting from the top, moving down. And that would mean that on the annex floor, there is the city courts. That area could be removed. The areas that we had originally been given, which were then taken back away on the second floor. The budget office, yes. The second floor where the prosecutor's office is, frankly, from my perspective, should have been a courtroom all along. Could use it there. The clerk's office moving down here so that the public comes in on the first floor versus climbing to the third floor. When they're doing their jobs here, removing the auditor and the treasurer and putting them in a different office, obviously that would entail moving those members of the BOCC who is here as well. And there would be space for quite a few courtrooms to be revamped.
So from a cost standpoint and an operational standpoint, it makes sense to try to locate all the courtrooms in the courthouse where there's adequate security. So we don't have to replicate security in any of the outbuildings, right?
Correct.
And so operationally, would it pose a problem if the 13th courtroom isn't located in this courthouse, but in the public safety building, for example, or the annex? Does that pose an operational issue?
Well, the annex is connected, and I think the you have security coming in the annex area as well as the front. We also do have courtrooms in the juvenile building. So our court commissioners operate in courtrooms 2 and 1 and 2. 1 and 2. I don't know why they're numbered the way they are, but 1 and 2, and the judge operates out of courtroom 3 within the commissioner when the judge is not in there moving in and out. So there is that ability. I think one of the suggestions was there's room to expand in juvenile, but
one of the questions that have come up in past discussions is when there's idle time within courtrooms, and how does that come about, and how do we take potential advantage of that?
Well, part of the problem is, for instance, if there is something scheduled in my courtroom and it folds, it is more than likely been scheduled in my courtroom for quite some time. So it's not as if when it folds the day before that I have the ability to put somebody else into that courtroom. I can't just call the lawyers up and say, hey, I've got space right now, come on down, because of notice, because of due process, because of getting people told where it is they're supposed to go and when they're supposed to go there. I will tell you that our staff works kind of a puzzle on a regular basis, trying to put bodies into open courtrooms, including the juvenile courtrooms, when things come open. For instance, when our judges are on vacation, then first appearances go to whoever's on vacation if the judge who is in juvenile needs his courtroom back for conducting hearings. And so we're moving things around as people are on vacation as best we can. But court doesn't just happen the day we know somebody's gonna be missing. So for instance, if I got sick tomorrow, would I be able to have somebody fill my courtroom? Probably not, because that's not enough time to put notice unless it's people that are coming and it's overflow coming in. For instance, I know there are overflow domestic violence hearings that are being held today because they're on a list. The DV commissioners were full. I had a spot. So I took a hearing. I know Judge Anderson took a hearing, but those are Zoom hearings or people can be directed to those courtrooms, but they're already slated to be here today versus not slated. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. So like if you have a case that is scheduled for one of your courtrooms, but then at the last minute, the parties settle.
Correct.
The courtroom's already spoken for and set aside, and there's no
Yes.
way you can use that.
With criminal things, a lot of times we'll backfill. So the first criminal case that might settle, then the next criminal case comes in behind that, but they're already scheduled for trial that day. Our civil cases, I do know our family law trials are packed probably about 20 per Monday, the number of cases. However, depending upon what's going on, if you have a case that has experts that are coming in or witnesses that are coming from somewhere other than close enough to get here within an hour, those usually get reset because they don't have the ability to come in when something settles or folks get sick or an officer gets called out to do something.
So operationally, what would change in your world, both in the short term, medium term, and long term with the addition of the 13th judge?
We would be able to spread out the workload, get more of our backlogs out, so there would be another courtroom to put there rather than this kind of constant puzzle piece moving that we do on a regular basis, short term. Midterm and long term, kind of the same thing. We spread a workload out and hopefully get some of the hearings that we are continuing to roll that kind of just back up, get some of those addressed faster. I do know when you have a judge to force things to happen, then people get their work done and they get things settled versus just continuing it along, which is what with caseload standards, what we're attempting to not have happen, continuances. But
what was the dollar amount for the cost of a courtroom? You said 1 point something.
But it's a soft number because there's no official estimates on it.
Oh.
1.175.
Mike, you've got something that Gil had offered.
Yeah, I have.
Kind of a maybe a little bit tighter estimate.
So on the head count, and you guys help me out, I have a Superior Court judge, an assistant court reporter, 2 clerks, 2 COs, possibly a public defender, and possibly one for the prosecutor's office. Does that sound right?
I think we have enough work, real quick, but without needing more PDs and prosecutors for instance. So I think that's one of the tricky things when we lump it. Yeah, in an ideal world, but the 13th judge and the staff to support them is frankly my top priority because we're at capacity.
Right.
But yeah.
I put down here potential caseload impacts, because you don't know what the impact would be.
Sure. But you're speaking only to, criminal is a large part. They are the constitutional one we have to get out first. But I'm telling you, our civil caseloads are massive. And there are no additional costs to the civil because it's all usually private attorneys. Usually, there are other types of cases that there are court-appointed attorneys for, but I don't believe the county is doing any of the funding of those.
Would you still need the clerks though? So the,
Yes,
okay.
we would need clerks, yes.
So if you had those, then, you know, and then I didn't add in there, and I could look at that part of it too. So I have like 30,000 for, your supporting M and O for a courtroom. And then the construction cost, out of whack was $1.5 million. And then whatever that 50,000 for the FF&E. So I don't know, it's gonna be around that neighborhood. So, you know, total, I've got 2 million for a cost, if you did have to add the prosecutors and public defenders for it too.
And how much of that is ongoing versus one time?
The courtroom would be a capital improvement, FF&E would be a capital, the M&O and the staffing would be ongoing.
And so how much is just?
So subtotal for the staffing is 844,435, and then 30,000 for the M&O.
That's assuming no COLAs over the years, so that's.
That's just straight cost.
Just
Yeah.
1 year.
Yeah,
And if additional attorneys would have to be provided, so that's a question, so.
yeah.
Judge, on, you just hit something that kind of triggered a bell to me too. Where likely would this 13th judge be focused at? What would their case types be?
Well, it would be wherever the biggest need is at the time that got funded. So as we sit here today, more than likely it would be heading towards family law and towards a civil practice. However, that judge is always available for criminal matters. And I can tell you that when we have cases with speedy trial issues, that's where we put our resources first. So to say that the judge is only going to do one thing or another isn't how we operate. For instance, my family law department, which is, they've got huge case numbers. We have 2 family law judges. But I had to take a family law judge, remove her from that docket and have her try a criminal case because it was up against the wall and everybody else was busy. So then there was nobody to handle the cases that she was supposed to be addressing.
But the bulk of it sounds like civil and family law sort of stuff. And,
Yes.
and to your point earlier, in many cases, those are private attorneys that
Correct.
the parties are hiring.
Correct. Most, the divorce attorneys do not. Divorce attorneys, paternity, other than the county on the like child support matters, but those aren't the ones that are backlogged. It is the dissolutions, the civil protection orders, and those are all either folks that are representing themselves, so there's no cost from a personnel standpoint, or that have private counsel.
Your Honor, also, I'm sorry, didn't know you had another question. The 3 spots that we kind of looked at, and it's probably more, was the up in the annex where Counsel for Defense presently resides, and then the Bar Association, which they would be removed and have to be relocated. So it would essentially be a Superior Court across from the other Superior Court in the annex on the, is that the 4th floor? 4th floor. And then the law library is obviously identified as a potential space, and then also the jury room was also, came up as one of the potential spots. So if you were gonna use a hallway where budget is right now and then my office is, would that be a smaller courtroom? That wouldn't be a full-purpose courtroom, right?
That was the small courtroom, and I believe facilities at the time that we were given that space had estimated it would be about $50,000 to redo that particular space.
Okay.
Once the law library got done, prosecutors got done going into the law library got done being adjusted, which then left that area.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure I'm looking at the same spot you guys are thinking of.
Yes.
When you say the jury room, do you mean the jury lounge?
Yeah,
Where do
So
we-
then where
do we put our
where would we
jurors?
put
well,
that?
all of these are gonna require a move of someone to go somewhere else,
Oh, good Lord,
right?
there's 200
And
people
so
there.
it's gonna have to be something that we just look at.
Commissioner French?
So the cases that you just listed, in terms of what the 13th judge would be dealing with, are those jury trials?
They, divorce trials are not, civil cases are. So civil cases, for instance, the medical malpractices, the employment issues,
Right.
the L&I, all of those things are potentially, they have the right to a jury trial, and most of them take that. But family law matters, the civil protection orders are not jury trials.
So is it fair to say that with the 13th judge, that's going to be doing some of the things that a court commissioner cannot do because of the jury trials? Is it possible we can eliminate one of the court commissioners then?
Well, you could, but that doesn't diminish the workload. The workload is already, I mean, it would send it backwards if you ask me.
So here's what I'm trying to reconcile with. All of us are still trying to catch up with COVID.
Sure.
And the backlog that is created by that. And at some point, we will have caught up and then we'll get back to normal. And so when we get back to normal, what does normal look like? And so, I think all of us are trying not to overstaff with permanent employees that then we've got to figure out, okay, now we don't have enough work to keep them busy. What are we going to do? So that's why I'm trying to figure out is, am I dealing with the pig and the snake?
Sure.
Or am I dealing with just the bigger snake?
And that's a great question, because if you have reviewed what it was that the numbers that we have provided, those are all pre-COVID numbers. So the need for 23.65 judicial officers is all pre-COVID. So COVID isn't affecting those numbers. COVID has exacerbated those numbers, but the numbers were all pre-COVID based upon AOC caseloads.
So, and I'm not trying to argue, so I'm just trying to put my world into your world and your world into my world. In the last 20 years, the county has grown by 33%, and yet we have fewer staff people today than we had in 2020 or 2000. And the reason is because we've made heavy investments in technology. We've gotten rid of stupid stuff we did for no apparent reason. We're much more efficient today than we were 20 years ago and stuff. And so we've gotten smarter about how we do what we're doing. And so I'm aware of the 1997 AOC determination and stuff. But since then, we've done a lot of things that have changed how all of us do our work. And so what I'm trying to do is say, did the court benefit from those investments or not? And if they did, then why is the demand the same as it was in 1997? And if it didn't, then why did we make those investments? I mean, you see what I'm challenged with? And so help me understand what the difference is between Superior Court and the rest of the county, because I'm having difficulty making that transition in terms of thought.
I don't know if you want to launch into that?
Well, I can say from a court administration perspective, of course, we benefited from the computer usage, the software that IT has created for us.
Yeah.
If we didn't have those things, then my staff would need to be double.
Well, double is an understatement, sorry.
I mean, we rely on it a lot, and we have gotten as efficient as we can, but a judge is a judge is a judge. I mean, no computer is going to replace a judge if you need a divorce. If you have a lawsuit, I can't be more efficient to resolve your case if what it takes is for you to be before a judge. I mean, our bench has grown by 2 court commissioners in the last 10 years, and that's because of the mental health
Right.
commitment cases, and the state funds those. So, but as far as the litigation, that we haven't grown. We've been at 12 judges since 1998. So we can't efficient our way out of that.
But you have more court commissioners today than you did in 97 or 2000.
We have two more, yep. And those are, again, were paid for by the state for a specific workload that we saw coming down the pike. That doesn't, the law has gotten a lot more complex as it does every year. And so there's just a lot more litigation that our court commissioners have to do.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because the law has also changed to where now you got the Blake decision. So a lot of the cases you were hearing before, you're not going to hear anymore because the Supreme Court take that off the table.
Those cases pled.
They what?
They bled.
They blame.
They were easy ones,
Those were
easy ones.
Oh my God.
Yeah, okay.
So, to that point, before you move past that, Commissioner French, what does that do to the drug court?
Yeah.
I mean,
Obliterates
because
it.
I believe there is if I'm correct, there's a line item expense for the drug court. But if people aren't really getting charged for drugs anymore, why would anybody go through the drug court?
Because they are charged with possession of stolen property, trafficking in stolen property, stealing cars, eluding police officers. I mean, there is a myriad of, when you look at somebody's criminal history, you can look at and say, okay, this person has a drug problem. You might not see one conviction for a drug-related offense, but you can look at it and say, this person is stealing to feed a habit. And it's prolific. It is what your public is angry about because their garages are getting broken into, their cars are getting smashed into, their cars are being stolen off the street as they're being warmed up to come to work. And those are the cases that should be, well, and a lot of, I'll tell you, domestic violence is drug fueled. So the violent offenses, it all has a drug related piece to it and should be part of the drug court. It is not within our control as to who gets to be allowed to go to drug court, however.
But is the drug court still being utilized
It
at the
is.
level it was pre-Blake?
I don't believe so.
No, but I will say.
Because there were people that have criticized the prosecutor pre-Blake that the drug court wasn't being utilized very much. And so now if it's even less, how much money are we pumping in to put forward an even smaller amount of an amount that a lot of people were criticized as not being very many?
Well, and I think we certainly can look at that. That's funded with the 1/10, the 1% mental health sales tax. Our numbers have gotten a lot smaller, but I would say that the people that are in the drug court are the people that need a lot more time in the drug court to be successful. Because they're not just the one-off caught with some drugs. I mean, they, again, kind of a life of crime. And so people that could churn in and out and be successful after about a year and a half, they have to stay in drug court for more time in order to really get their feet on the ground and be successful getting out of the program. So yes, it has gotten smaller, and that's something that we continue to work with Larry and his team on how do we expand this. We all agree that it's good and it truly can help. But yeah, we haven't gotten it back up to where we would like it to be, but it is still useful.
So, if we can find, because, so now the delta is somewhere between probably $500,000 and $900,000 in terms of annual cost, depending upon how you staff the court. And then there's another 1.2 to 1.5 money to build it. So assuming that we, for laughs and giggles, say we're going to get rid of the law library, because my understanding is it's not used very much, and the ones that are using it are probably outside attorneys that probably have access to, internet and all that other kind of fun stuff. I don't know. But if we were to say the law library could be converted into a court, that's not going to happen overnight. That's probably 6 months out until it's done and remodeled and all that kind of stuff.
I'd take 6 months.
What's that?
I'd take 6 months. I think that's optimistic myself, but I don't know what has to be done to build a courtroom.
But you also have a
With
temporary court commissioner that you're bringing in.
If we can find a space to put them and a clerk to put with them. I know that Mr. Sparber has done a fantastic job working with district court to find us a spot over there. We just, we gotta be able to utilize it.
Well, that's one of the other options for us is, as I understand it, one of the district courts is not used on a regular basis and stuff, so we could always say Superior Court, take over that courtroom and district court, and superior court battle it out, and whoever survives gets the room.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, just laughs and giggles. But I mean, that is an opportunity that would get you into a courtroom faster, and it'll also get the district court sitting where you're at going, what the hell are you guys doing? And stuff. So I'm just continuing to try and figure out what's the path forward here and stuff. So anyway.
So you wouldn't hire a 13th court judge until the courtroom is built?
Well, we have to have some place for that judge to operate out of, and so it would be without some place to put that judge and to operate, it doesn't make any sense. Although.
So if we created the
find
position,
someplace.
we're not going to hire that. It's actually the governor that's going to appoint it. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, and stuff. So, and so, do we have enough attorneys here in town to where you could pick? No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Well, and that is the other, we know that a courtroom is gonna take time, and so we're just asking to be a part of the plan here.
Yeah.
You know, we discussed Superior Court's judges are up for election in 2 years. If we wanted to say that was the year, I mean, again, we're aware that the money for this, the planning, none of that happens
Overnight.
just because we want it.
Right.
We need to be in the plan. This needs to, and we've been in the plan many times throughout the years, and then the plan shifts. So we're just looking for a commitment that in the next 1 to 2 years, we're gonna get somewhere. Because if we don't have that commitment, my fear is that I'm gonna retire and I'm gonna have 12 judges.
So that's new information. I appreciate that, because if the timetable is not tomorrow, but it's a strategy and a plan to get us to where we got a 13th judge and a courtroom that's fully built out and everything like that, and then the people get to select who that judge is, that's a lot easier for me, because believe it or not, the governor and I don't think alike.
Certainly.
And stuff, and so I'd rather have the people make that decision than the governor. So I do like that approach.
So is there a requirement for size and space of a courtroom?
Well, it needs to be big enough to where we can have jury trials conducted within it. So while I appreciate the question with regards to civil cases or family law cases don't
Right.
need a jury, well, that judge is going to have to do jury trials. We will always have, well, there are folks sitting waiting to be tried in a jail, and Mr. Sparber is doing his darndest to get them out of there. So that judge has to be able to do trials like Judge Zamblin when she left her family law and took over a jury trial. So it has to be of a size where you can bring people in. I mean, thank goodness, and hopefully we don't have another COVID-like situation where we are having to space people out.
Right.
Because at that point in time, none of our courtrooms were big enough, and we were obviously picking juries in the jury lounge, which please don't take the jury lounge from us, because that's the only space that I am aware of down here that can accommodate that if something else should happen, plus accommodate when we have had 200 to 300. I don't know what the capacity is,
325 or so, and right now we still have them spaced out a little bit, just because, again, I don't know that we're gonna get back to the day that citizens are sitting right next to each other, just, but it's about 160, which again allows us to get 3 jury trials out on a day. And so if we have a smaller room, then we have less capacity to get those jury trials out.
And you guys continue now to use, I mean, they're using pro tems in the interim here to help catch up with some of those cases, so I wanna make sure you bring those points up as well too. And then we did get an offer from district court to use one of the courtrooms on a Friday, if we could take advantage of that, maybe do some plea agreements and some of those things out of that courtroom over there. So.
Are any of the courtrooms in municipal court utilized today, would they be able to be sizable enough for purposes of Superior Court? I've walked through and by them, but I can't recall what exactly they look like.
They would probably fit some of our commissioner dockets, because the commissioners don't have juries, so that they are big enough for the commissioners to be there with the parties and witnesses coming in. I know the jury boxes, I think, are just a room for 6-ish, but they would be big enough for that type of thing. We could probably put first appearances in those courtrooms, first appearance judge, or first appearance commissioner that 5 days a week has to see all the inmates come through, so that's a video court, would certainly would fit that.
Okay.
Which was what we were hoping to use the finance department area for.
But if one of those were vacated today, it wouldn't be large enough for handling all of your types of cases.
No, but we could put first appearances in there. And again, one of the things that we didn't bring up, we have 20 judges and commissioners and just 18 courtrooms. So that's part of why, as Judge McKay brings up, we're already trying to puzzle it so that we're being as efficient as we can. So man, if I could have a 5 days a week smaller courtroom, then I could free up a judge courtroom and then I can get more trials out. So I mean, we won't turn down space.
Right. We won't turn down space or bodies, frankly.
Yeah, so is just kind of noodling this out, is an answer an available courtroom that doesn't have to necessarily hold jury trials in?
Correct. I mean, that's a partial answer, which is what the second floor was doing for us for first appearances. So that's when we thought for $50,000, that's pretty good. We can get them in there, and in the mornings, it would be where we were hoping to have our guardianship staff, and so it's right there. You could shift people into that courtroom to handle in the mornings the guardianship matters that happen or need court time.
It does put an interesting twist to it then, though, because at least we got the municipal courts that we could,
Make it something else.
yeah. Yeah.
And the municipal court is well aware that I'm trying to get them thrown out. I did say no offense, but I'd like your space.
We won't put your name on it.
No, I don't care if you do. They can give me a call.
So, no offense, but speaking of space, so some of the judges' chambers that I've been in are pretty good size. And as we look at knocking down walls potentially or moving things around, and I only ask this because we're doing it in the HR building right now, right? I have so many staff that are hoteling now, so we're sharing cube spaces basically. And I don't even know if it's allowed to be an option or if it is an option, but as I really start looking around a lot of our buildings, I start questioning, do we have individual offices that are pretty sizable that we could look at combining in some places, and then maybe sharing offices, having shared judge chambers or rotating chambers? I don't even know if that's, no offense at all, if it's supposed to be yours, it's yours, but that's stuff that we're even looking at in some of our departments right now, going, how do we get public records out of the basement and into another building, right? We can maybe hotel them. So that was something that kind of came to mind as I've walked through some of these areas that have very large individual offices.
I think it would be difficult only because I know what I do in my office. If you go to, for instance, Judge Please's office on a regular basis, she's in her chamber. She has externs that are sitting at her conference room table in her office, although how she works that way, I'll be darned if I know. Maybe it's because she gets here at 2 o'clock in the morning and leaves at 7 or 8, but she's already sharing. It's just kind of how people work, and it would be a little, in my opinion, difficult, but.
And it does not solve the courtroom-ish. I mean, I think that, and again, in my ideal world, I would love to have a new courthouse because the space isn't utilized the best way that it could, but they're beautiful old courtrooms, and I would hate to tear apart all of the old historic wood just to create another space for a judge to work from if that's not going to include another courtroom space. Because again, judges are up on the bench a lot. I keep them busy.
And that's a kind of a good question, but Mike, have you been to the Arizona example? I think it
I
was
have not.
Maricopa
But
County.
I'm willing to go.
Well, and my understanding
Especially this time of year.
built a new, high-tech court facility, which is like the premier, and it's safe for transport. The public isn't exposed, so that transport is not, transport's safe, the inmates safe, everybody, it's just how it's built, and I haven't seen it, so I don't know, but it would be, and it's like that optimal space use
Where
type
is it?
thing.
Where is that at, Judge?
I think it's
Maricopa County,
Maricopa County.
they're pretty fancy down there.
Yeah.
I hear they invest in the sports teams and that's how they can afford it all. Serious. Right? Okay, thank you.
I thought the sheriff down there was putting people in tents.
Tents. There's that too.
It's a little warmer there all year round.
To a pile. So would it be advantageous if, in the near term to have a smaller area for you guys to have like video courts, or how can we help you?
So we
in
do
the
have
interim?
video courts already. Our commissioners are operating the ITA courtrooms from their chambers. But,
Mhm.
and then I think our clerk has
Workstations.
somewhere, although I'm not quite sure how they're doing that. Maybe they're using headphones because I'm not sure that the clerks have a lot of areas where anybody can hear. But we are doing that, but those courtrooms are being then utilized with one commissioner in chambers, and the other commissioner out on a bench.
But by way of strategy, can you move a commissioner out of one of those courtrooms if you had a smaller one to operate and then schedule around that?
Right.
Like, let's say
Yes.
the budget office and my office or something
Right.
of that,
Yes.
of that nature, would that be beneficial in the near term?
It would help in the near term. It doesn't solve the
No,
13th judge
no.
issue, but yes, I mean, any space where I could put somebody for hearings, that'd be fantastic.
Okay, just noodling it.
And we're way past our time, I apologize.
Well, but this conversation, I don't know about my fellow commissioners, but it's been helpful from my standpoint to understand the variables that are available to us in terms of trying to solve the problem. I'm not unsympathetic to the need. I just, someone's gonna lose their office, and that's okay. But I'm just trying to figure out what's the most efficient way to do this.
There's a lot over there. You could just build us a whole.
In my perfect world, that whole building goes away. I mean, that's just, yeah, just saying. Anyway.
And then I was gonna ask you guys a question the last time you were in, and I totally forgot. When you were asking for the personnel, additional personnel, when pre-COVID, Ashley, I think you had come in with whoever the presiding was at the time, and you had said there was a plan to implement sort of a philosophy or a program of limiting the number of continuances. Did that ever get implemented? And if so, how?
It sure
is
did.
Okay.
And it launched.
Because it was right before COVID, so I wasn't sure.
We were starting to see some success. And then, I mean, the Supreme Court, and correctly so, we were in the middle of a pandemic. We didn't want bench warrants to be going out and people getting arrested. So we are now trying to get back on track with that. It's a slow process because again, the attorneys need time to get caught up on things. So I know that our judge that is assigned to that right now is working really hard. And I mean, again, we sent 2 trials out today. One of them pled and one was dismissed. So to me, that's a success because those are 2 that are resolved. But if we didn't have a judge to send those 2 to, then they'd still be chilling out there in the ether. So
We frequently debrief with jurors because jurors sit in the jury assembly room waiting to get into a courtroom. And they get very angry that their time is not utilized well. And I do not blame them. They get paid a whopping $10 to come down here. Plus they have to pay for parking and then they have to pay for their parking tickets when they get parking tickets. But that's another issue. But we debrief on a regular basis saying, you being here, you've done your job. Because I can say to a defendant, I'm ready to go. I have a jury down the hall. You have to make a decision as to what it is you want to do. And that forces a decision. Got a jury, we try the case if that's what the defendant wants to do. Or what a civil bunch of lawyers want to do because those settle as well as they come up to trial. But having that ability to say, I'm not going to continue this, we will try this case today, is where you're talking the case scheduling issues that we were attempting to get going. But you have to be able to,
you gotta send them to trial.
you have to
Can't call
have,
their bluff too much.
Well, and don't know if it was my husband's case or not today, but he was, theft happened at his company, and so he texted me today to say, hey, the guy pled, so I don't have to go to trial tomorrow.
Right.
It's a good thing.
But, which is a good thing, but it's been over a year, and like 3 or 4 different times he was told he was supposed to show up in court, and then it was continued. So I think that's, as we look at customer service, which is, to our constituents, your constituents, it's trying to figure out how do we have that balance? And the continuances, and I think I've talked to you guys about this before, especially with family law, are just detrimental to the kids.
Well, and
Because they're
those,
looking for that closure.
and those are the ones that get bumped behind everything else that we're doing, and that's, yeah, anyway.
So I think that's, something that, and I don't know, I feel passionate, I think you guys feel passionate too, is trying to figure out how do we help, in that process, because then that also helps, in the jail, because I don't know if this person was sitting in jail waiting for this trial to happen or not. I didn't look into all of it, but I'm sure I could ask you later about it. But it's like, that's, someone who's been sitting there a long time, or, even if they're in the community and haven't gone to trial, they don't know if they're gonna have their job and what they need to do for their family and all those things. So I don't know, so yes, I'm with Josh and Al, that, if we can really work on those contingencies, because it seems like the attorneys get used to it.
Absolutely.
And expect it, and so, yes, so it's kind
Can
of like
be
you
a
have
trial
to,
strategy as well.
yes, you have to kind of hold them more accountable from that perspective, so.
And for my understanding, if a judge just says, no, you don't get a continuance, is there, what happened? They show up,
they
or
show
can they
up.
appeal that,
They
no
show up.
continuance? I mean, what,
And then the issue is what kind of attorney you're dealing with,
okay,
and potentially we get the case back on appeal because we should have continued things. It just kind of depends upon what the case is. But unfortunately, what I see happening is that the attorneys change on a regular basis. So that attorney is in front of you saying, well, I'm not ready to go. I just got this case assigned to me. Those are not decisions that the court can control as the personnel, in other words, who's assigned to a case. Unfortunately, I can tell the prosecutors, to a certain extent, I don't care. I don't have the same leeway with a defendant, depending upon circumstances with a defendant, because it is the defendant's constitutional rights that we're dealing with here. And you don't necessarily want to try that case twice. Or at least I don't.
And is that more for, I'm
That's
just asking
criminal,
the question.
that's criminal
Yeah,
in
public
nature.
defenders or private attorneys?
both.
Could be both. But not the same issue for family law attorneys. With those cases, it's like, oh, we're ready to go, let's go. So, yeah, but you gotta have a judge to try them, and we don't.
Any other questions? Thank you for staying longer than, I know you probably have something to
Appreciate
do.
your time, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being down here.
Okay.
Kevin, you ready to go? Proud of your staff too? Cool. Might need a another chair. No,
I
that's
can
fine.
hop there.
Oh, that's okay.
Well, now we have IT to give us some great information, and Kevin, I'll let you introduce your staff and
Sure.
get started with your slide presentation.
First, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Our department appreciates our opportunity to present here today. We've been wanting to get out in front of all of you anyway. We would love to have any of you that have never been over to the IT building to come over at some point. We'd love to show you around. You get a better perspective about a lot of the things that we're going to bring up today that you probably will have questions about. So we plan on sending out some invites at some point in time. I'm Kevin Norris, I'm the IT director. This is Sean Dimitrovich and Andrew Hughes. I'll let them introduce themselves and what they're responsible for.
Like Kevin said, I'm Sean Dimitrovich. I've been with IT since 1999. I oversee their network operations group, their telecom group, their server applications group, and more recently now their public safety groups.
And I'm Andrew Hughes. I've been with county IT since 2005. I briefly left for the city in 2019, but then I decided to come back in 2020.
We're very thankful for that too.
They all come back.
They all come back. So, yes, I started off as an entry-level programmer, and then I worked my way up to be the database administrator. And then when I came back from the city, I moved into a management role. So I oversee the server operations team. So we manage the data center, the servers, the storage. And then I also manage our database management group, all the databases that are used all throughout the county.
And Kevin, I just want to say congratulations on becoming
thank
the IT director. So,
Appreciate that.
yes, because how long have you been with the county?
You don't want to know. I've been here since 1984. I know I'm in the top 5 on the seniority list in the county at this point. And that's not a goal. That wasn't anything that I was striving for, but that's where I currently am. My 2 photos, my daughters saw those, and one of them said, 3+ decades at the county doesn't do a body good, Dad. So that's kind of just where I'm at, you know, and I am happy to be here. I was reluctant, honestly, stepping into this, but I got some good encouragement from some of the leadership here even, and I appreciate that prod and that push, and I'll do the best I can. And it's really nice to know in this position I've got, especially on the technical side of the building, these 2 guys to assist, because without them, we really need their abilities and knowledge, and they'll be speaking throughout this a little bit as well. But with that, let's get started. That's introductions. Next slide, if we can bring that up. If you're following along, things to consider as we go through what we're going to talk about in regard to capital requests. We have to consider these things because they are affecting us at every turn these days. Microchip shortages, supply chain issues, the availability of vendors being put off, getting things delayed as far as receiving them, that's part of the supply chain as well. Price forecasts, we've got quotes that are 3 years out, but we know that they can potentially change, especially in the quotes that we have 5 years out and 6 years out that we'll be showing you soon. Those are all subject to change. And if the evolving infrastructure that we're dealing with, things change there on a 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 month basis. We'll get new information about new ways to do things, and we'll want to take advantage of some of those new things too that will affect how we do business. Next slide. This is a big thing that we implemented a couple of years ago, and we're moving along with our cloud smart technology. We want to implement solutions when they make sense, and we've implemented a lot already. Our Docfinity document management system is a cloud-based system. We've moved our SmartGov building and planning system from on-premise to the cloud in the last 2 years. GovQA is another, our PRR management system is cloud-based. We're currently looking at our new ERP will be a cloud-based system, and another new large application that we'll highlight in a little bit will be cloud-based as well. It's the only way we want to go with anything that's software-based. And then also some of the more hardware database related things, it's a little tougher to justify getting to the cloud with them, but we're making some inroads there as well. And we're constantly evaluating, with the help from Microsoft, some of our vendors. They provide support for us to look at what it'll cost to run things on-prem, what it'll cost to run things in the cloud. And we look at that stuff very seriously, look at what the costs are. So far, most of our hardware, our database support type things are quite a bit cheaper to run on-prem, but we're constantly looking at those too and trying to make inroads. We'll talk about one of our recent forays into the cloud that's really paying off already. This executive summary here, this is what we plan on covering today. All of our capital requests are going to center on software replacements and then hardware requests. We don't have any building or structure capital requests at all. We just finished a large PDU, power distribution unit replacement within our building. We got off of our original power source into that IT building, which is over 50 years old now, or close to 50 years old. We've replaced all of that. That's all taken care of. So our building structurally is sound. We don't see any need to make any requests regarding that. Our requests will be revolving around software replacement and projects, and then several hardware and network related capital requests. And Sean, if you wouldn't mind, you can talk about some of these other items beyond the first bullet item there.
Sure, so right now we have two network cores, one here at the IT data center, another one back out at the CCP. Both of those will need to be replaced here in the near future, mainly driven by end-of-life software and hardware by the vendors. They won't be supported anymore. Wouldn't be able to patch them, or if we had any issues, wouldn't be able to call for support. Same thing with our wireless network environment that was implemented back in 2016. It's also coming to the end of its useful life here, and that basically controls all of our 160 wireless access points that we have all over the county. So with that newer technology, some of the older APs that it currently controls will have to be replaced as part of this upgrade. So that's all accounted for. We have some virtual network environments to replace. Andrew, you want to talk about that?
So yeah, just like with the network hardware, our server, we buy all our servers from Dell. And when we buy them, they warranty them for 7 years. So if a hard drive fails, memory, anything, we can call within 4 hours or next business day, we can get a replacement. So, once they go out of support, we really don't want to run critical workloads on those servers anymore, because if something fails, we couldn't get a replacement. So a lot of, our requests are really, it's just that rolling 7 years. And so in 2017, we purchased one of our clusters to run our Hyper-V virtual environment. That's going to be going out of support. And so the county, we have two Hyper-V virtual environments that we maintain. And that way we can run different workloads. We have roughly 350 virtual machines that we run. And we have over 140 terabytes worth of data that we back up. So just some numbers to give you guys an idea of the volume.
We also have some yearly network switch replacements we've kind of figured in there. Have roughly about 50 of these older switches that are coming up, same deal, end of life. So we've kind of budgeted out, 10 per year for the next 5 years. So it's not such a big blast there on 1 year. Then we also have some network cabling initiatives that we're after. There's a big push for work from home. There's a lot of old cabling here that won't support voice over IP telephones or power over Ethernet for cameras or any of that type of technology. So we need to replace that. There's some stuff in like jail admin there that it's the cabling there is 20 years old. It can't support the newer computers that you hook up to it. You have to set the speeds way back. So down in HR, there's one, we ran into some issues there, but sorry, Ashley, your computer's never gonna be able to go over 100 megabytes that we replace the cables, so.
That's all right.
We'll figure it in.
We'll make it.
And then we have some older fiber optic cable that just needs to be replaced. It's limited in bandwidth, 1 gigabit. We'd like to replace that with new single mode fiber that can go 10 gig, 100 gig, depending on what is required, so. Next slide, please.
Okay, software capital requests over the next 5 to 7 years. We have two really big systems that we need to replace. The PeopleSoft replacement project is underway. RFP is out. We're estimating $8 million spread over 2 years for that project. $4 million in 2023 and $4 million in 2024. That request has to land somewhere. I guess it lands in IT. We will be the provider of support for that. We will manage the maintenance and support for that with the vendor as well. So this is a good place to see those numbers and have the request come from us. The other big system that we are looking to replace in the next 3 to 4 years is the assessor and treasurer tax systems, the Ascent and ProVal systems. They are same vintage as PeopleSoft. They were implemented in 1998 and 1999. I know very well, I implemented both of them. And I supported both of them for many, many years. They're antiquated. They were sterling, bright, shiny new things 20 plus years ago. Now they're really old, dusty, dilapidated, still working, still chugging along, but they need to be replaced. The assessor and treasurer are both on board with this. We're estimating $3,500 or $33.5 million in 2024, another $3.5 million in 2025 for those requests. One thing to note about the assessor treasurer project, it is mutually exclusive from the ERP project in probably all ways except for maybe funding. It can be done at the same time. It doesn't affect the same people in our office, or the same sets of users, the same subject matter experts. They're all completely different. So this is one that we necessarily don't have to wait on to start until we're at the end of the ERP solution. I believe we can move forward with this, at some point in time sooner than that, because we're only really seriously affecting the assessor, the treasurer, and IT, obviously, but we can manage that along with working on the ERP solution as well.
So is this capital request coming out of IT, but it's really shared by all three
Yes.
departments, correct?
Yes. It'll be mainly shared between the assessor and treasurer. And I would say a good 50-50 on that.
Kevin, they're two different systems, or it's one system?
It will be one
two-
system replacing a multitude of systems that we currently have, two main legacy systems, and then some other smaller systems that we developed over time.
I was gonna say, because you have some homegrown
Oh, yeah.
systems in there and
Yeah.
stuff that talks.
Just a few, yes.
I try to do some of those reconciliations, so yeah.
Yeah. And currently we have the Ascend system, which both departments use. That's our tax and land management and ownership management system. And then the ProVal system, which is our computer assisted mass appraisal system, which is used to evaluate all of the property in the county. Okay, next slide. Any other questions regarding our software requests? Yeah.
So you have ARP or ERP up there, but technically we've designated ARP funds for those.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that then amends the ask that you put in by, it looks like a
It
potential
would.
$8 million
It
less
would
than your ask.
definitely affect that.
We would still have, for purposes of our 6-year capital plan, we'd still have that on there, because we want to show types of investments that are needed, as well as funding sources for it. So,
But they're not technically asking for those funds, I guess, right? It looked different.
no, but I think as Kevin's highlighting, he's kind of representing the body of software needs for the county, even though it's supporting other.
And one thing, if we can go back to that previous slide real quick, if that's possible, perfect. The assessor treasurer system as well. This is not a big field. It's kind of a niche area. There's really only a couple of players in this field for a system that we would need. And currently, and everything is in the assessor treasurer world is very state oriented to the state legislators and for the purposes of, valuation and tax calculation and collection purposes is very defined. And Snohomish County, just so you all know, is just launching one of the systems that would probably be one of the contenders. There's only about 2 contenders, I believe. One of them is a system called Aumentum. It's the same company that currently owns Ascend and ProVal. It's a very large cloud-based. They have both on-prem, cloud. We would probably only look at cloud. They are just launching this. The really good thing about having Snohomish launch this, our assessor and treasurer with any other county in the state probably works most like Snohomish than any other county in the state. We're very close to them in the IT world, in the assessor world, and the treasurer world. So they've done a lot of heavy lifting in front of us, paid for a lot of development to make this product very centric to Washington State. And I know that Momentum they're already reaching out to us to see if we're interested to be their next client. That's one reason why I bring up, we don't have to wait potentially to the end of the ERP project to potentially launch this other one. We have to be ready. We have to be convinced within our departments that we're ready to go out to RFP for that particular solution. But it's something we really need to kind of start thinking about. And I'm pressing with Tom Konis and Mike Bolts, Mike Gardner, our treasurer. I'm reaching out to them already as well on the reason to seek maybe ramping this up, getting this going in 2023 instead of waiting until 2024.
So then could you piggyback off the Snohomish contract, or would you have to go out for the bid?
I'm not really sure yet. We're trying to get some numbers from Snohomish, but I know they're in excess of $8 million. But a lot of that is because they've spent 3 years developing the system to work within Washington State. Their goal is to capture every larger county in the state of Washington. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Commissioner Tunney, I don't know if you had your question from the previous meeting answered regarding the ERP. Is it going to be something that's going to be mandatory for all departments to embrace? Did that get, okay, I never heard that piece. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, Kevin knows from other projects that I shouldn't say I'm skeptical, it's not that, but it's like, it's one of those where, knows me.
Rightly so. I'm currently working with departments who aren't all using the same tools, so I think it would be.
Yeah, well, and it's, centralizing versus decentralized, and will people really come along? And as we know from WinCam, is one of the examples that Kevin and I worked on together. Sure.
As long as this group, none of us leave, we'll get through this. That's kind of what it takes.
Yeah.
Sometimes new influences redirect.
So, and Concur was another project as well that spent a lot of money on that never, everybody thought it would be good and great and all of that, and then there was roadblocks at the end.
Sure.
So that's what I'm just trying to, I don't want to spend this kind of money and have roadblocks at the end. So I want to make sure that, we're just open and transparent about it all from the get-go. And so that way we don't have that, and know that there's going to be, it's going to be a lot of work, because as we set up, PeopleSoft, we set it up based on what our old system was, instead of what does the new system need to be. And even Questica, I guess that's the other software programs that, was supposed to be great and do all these things. And I think that we try to force it to us instead of us moving to it. And that's the other program that I work on.
One of the really good things I will say about Ascend and ProVal is that they are as vanilla as they can be. We have not modified one screen, one field on any screen, any data elements within those two applications in 23 years. And one of the reasons why we did that is because the vendor has always, as part of the support agreement, is that all legislative changes at the state level will be in an upgrade that you can just implement. And we've ran with that. We've used that as an excuse to our user base that we can't change these systems. And we've done really well by that. So you can do that, believe me. The system we had before those two systems, I spent, and my team of 4 other people spent 75% of our time just retrofitting, making it work for all the staff around here. So, and that was just in 2 departments. So I had 5 people dedicated to 2 departments, 75% of the time doing changes like that. Once you get to a point where you can be best practice oriented or standard oriented, our time is 5% on these applications with a much smaller team. truly done now. So that's our software. We'll move into our hardware asks now, and Sean will talk about these. He's much more knowledgeable.
So for 2023, a lot of these slides will look quite a bit the same, so please bear with me. But for 2023, we're looking at, some server replacements. We have a large majority of our servers are virtual, but we do have physicals in the mix that need to be replaced on the 7-year cycle. Next item there is our network switch refresh. That's the 10 switches we talked about earlier of the 50. Then some of the campus recabling upgrades and some of the campus fiber upgrades. We kind of pushed some of these up to the front there because some of the heavier hitter ones are coming further along. Plus with the campus cabling upgrades, we can push out more VoIP phones, more work from home with the Avaya Workspace client. That's a priority, so we're looking to push that out as much as we can. So.
Are these items currently contemplated in your M&O budget? Or is this a separate capital request from?
This is a separate capital request.
Okay.
None of these are in M&O.
Okay.
We'll talk about some of that, like some of the laptops and other equipment replacement in a little bit. Good question.
Next slide, please. Next slide, please. 23. Here we go, 24. So now, 24, we come into one of our Hyper-V virtual environment refreshes, the network core refresh for IT, and the CCV, wireless LAN controller for the Wi-Fi network environment, and then another full year of network switch replacements. Next slide. 25, we move into the other virtual environment replacements. Then we run into the data center network refresh. That kind of consists of 13 separate switches there and over 200 connections back into the data center, both virtual environments and all the physical servers. Then the third year of our network switch refresh. At the same time we would do the data center, we need to replace some SAN switches. The SAN switches allow the virtual environment storage to talk to pretty much everything else in the data center. And then we have some backup server replacements that are coming to end of life in 25. Next slide. 26, we move into some more physical server replacements. Another 10 of the network switch refresh. Kind of moved out of the big capital requests there, so we're back into more network cabling and more fiber optic upgrades. Next slide, please. One more, we're still on 27. There we go, 28. So then, kind of winding down through all the big requests there, we're into some more miscellaneous physical server replacements, and starting to come around now in 28 there when we first replaced all the 50 switches, the ones that we got with our software-defined network that we've implemented over the last 3 years of 50 switches. Those switches start to come up to end of life. So I'm starting to get a head on that game there with 25 switches to start replacing those. That's quite a while, so.
Questions regarding any of that?
On 2023, the campus fiber upgrades, how extensive is that for the 35,000? Is that like just one main fiber connection coming in? Is that building to building?
That's basically 3 departments. We have like 4th floor courthouse annex, 3rd floor annex, and facilities scheduled for 23.
Okay. And what does that do for us? Is that putting fiber in that's not there today, or is it just replacing?
It's replacing existing fiber. It's multi-mode now, which is.
Okay, that's this versus the single. Okay.
Single.
And are those the only locations that needs to be replaced, or is this just the first of, you see many
Most
more to
of
come?
what we have on-site and off-site, I'd say we're about 80% done. This is kind of what's remaining here on the physical county campus. There's stuff out at the fairgrounds that still needs to be replaced. It has older fiber, but that's later down the road.
Any other questions? Yeah.
So every couple of years you've got the server replacement. with new technology, I mean, is there a year that you see, whether it's 10, 15, I mean, how far in the future to where maybe we don't have servers here, but we're renting space from a server farm or something like that?
That's a great question. We're not exactly sure when that year is, because when we've routinely, on an annual basis at least, work with Microsoft, work with some of our other vendors on what would it cost to do what we're doing here in this particular, whatever we're doing? What would that cost in the cloud as opposed to here? It's always been many times cheaper to continue doing it on-prem. But that's changing. And we've seen that in a backup scheme that we're doing now in the cloud. That is just in the last year has changed dramatically. So I'm guessing that over time, we are gonna see some significant reasons to make a move.
Okay.
And they may be a little costly to get there, but long-term, it may be a good solution. At this point, we really can't justify
Well,
it.
so I think it's gonna be a combination over time. You know, one of our strategies is to go more cloud-based for software. So the ERP, you know, our on-prem PeopleSoft, you know, we have 25 servers that support that. So when that's in the cloud, those 25 servers are gonna need to be replaced, you know? So I think as we move more software solutions to the cloud, it will lower our dependence for on-premise servers. And then a lot of our in-house applications, they weren't really designed to run in the cloud. So I think, you know, the lift and shift is what they call it, where you just grab it on. Those don't always work well when you just try to throw them in the cloud. But if you develop an application native to the cloud, then it's, you know, it utilizes the cloud resource better. The way the cloud, you know, they charge you for every IOP, every network byte, every CPU, RAM, disk space, you know. So some of our legacy apps that were written, it would actually cost more to run in the cloud. But if we were to continue to develop with the cloud as our native platform, then they could be written in such a way to, you know, to be less costly. So I think it's gonna be, you know, over time, we're gonna naturally, that number's gonna come down. You know, the other thing is we, as a county, we have an insatiable need for storage. You know, like I said, 140 terabytes. So every week we're backing up our data, and we have 140 terabytes. When I started in 2009 keeping track of we had 10 terabytes of data that we were backing up. So from 2009 to 2022, it's gone up tenfold easy. So nobody likes to delete anything. And, you know, we have some files out there that haven't been touched since 1996 or, you know. So with all that storage, it costs money not only to store it, but to back it up. So it's kind of a compounding cost.
And delete it, you can't ever get it back.
And there's
Now we don't have to store it.
there's the public records request.
Yeah, you know, that is the other challenge we have, our email, you know.
And we're educating where we can. We're pretty up to date on the rules for document types and what the retentions are on those types. And a lot of departments have really made a great effort to eliminate their documents online and reduce that liability that we have with public records requests, which is great. We need all departments to do that. That's part of our challenge is to get that out there, to get that message there. Give them good reason to do this. And good reason is, I look at our email system, which we're working through a process to reduce that footprint. But the effort that we put forth in our department to literally on a daily basis, since Friday, we've had 6 requests for email PRR requests, 6. And we go clear back to the beginning of time with our emails. And that's a huge liability, and it's a huge time suck of our staff to have to do that kind of work. So we're really hoping that, I know there's a committee that's looking into reducing our footprint there, and that would be great. But that's just one element of data that we have.
I think, Kevin, to your point, Public Records has been working on kind of with our attorneys putting together a retention schedule, so to speak. So also some of the things that IT has been working on is, online document storage as we look at things like Docfinity. So HR has been kind of one of the initial groups to launch that. And we have created different files, so to speak, online that have automatic retention dates on it. So it'll automatically start dumping those files. So we're super guilty with email, I'll admit that. But a lot of us are starting to look at how can we utilize online platforms with built-in retention schedules. And then Public Records is coming in on the back end to start figuring out how do we write policy that we can then administer to our departments that IT can then use to implement as well, and then start hopefully breaking through some of this. So there's definitely work going on behind the scenes right
And
now.
documents stored in the cloud through Docfinity are being backed up here. That's something
We
don't
love,
have
the
to do.
more they can go to Docfinity,
Yeah.
the
yeah,
less
better.
we have,
And he said we back up once a week. We do a full backup of everything once a week.
well, yeah.
We take incremental backups every hour, just to, quell any,
Yeah, no, so we do daily
only back up our data
backups.
once a week. That's,
No,
that's-
we do the full, and then we have our incrementals throughout the week. And then we actually keep 12 weeks worth of data, both here at County IT and a same copy out at the CCB. And then I guess I'll jump the gun, but we just last month implemented Wasabi Online Cloud. It's a secure cloud solution. So we're actually able to take our backup and send it up to the cloud. So that'll give us an immutable offsite backup in case, heaven forbid, the building burned down, or another big risk now is, you've all heard of crypto malware, where these bad guys encrypt your data and then they want you to pay them to get the encryption or the decryption key. The other thing they're doing is they figured out that if they also encrypt your backups, then you really have no choice but to pay them. So our online backup, not only is it off-site, but it's also immutable, which means that not even a bad guy can delete it or change it.
completely separate from our network is what that.
So I've heard that some of what they're doing now is they're getting into your system. They're waiting like 20 to 30 days, so it's in your backup
Yep.
and you don't even know it.
Yep,
and-
that is
and
true.
sits there, it's like a worm that sits there.
But
through
part
that
of it, when the
20 to
data gets
30
written
days.
to the immutable backup, it can't be changed. It just is locked down to the point that
Yep.
it can't be updated. We've even set the parameters that we can't even change what gets written up to the cloud at this point.
But
It's
to
what it
your
is.
point, they are smart because there's some places that only keep a few weeks of backups. I won't mention any names, but no, I think the city has a lot shorter backup retention. But we keep 12 weeks, which is 3 months. So you would hope, and that's we also have a lot of other mitigations. We have a lot of Microsoft tools that are actively scanning our network. So the goal is to identify that well before the expiration of your backups, So if we can identify okay, we've had some data that's been encrypted within a month or 2 months, we still have that third month to go back to. So,
Yeah, because
Not
that's
ideal.
what I've just been hearing.
yeah,
is
that's what,
part of
they're
it, is
smart,
They're
don't
going in,
wait.
they're waiting,
Yeah.
and then going in, and so then you go to your backup and it's like already too late. that they've
Yep.
been taking care of that.
One of our big asks for supplemental budget will be getting another cybersecurity SecOps person on board, because the two that we have are just overwhelmed with everything that's going on right now. And we don't want to lose them because they get worn out working here, that we need the help we need. Other initiatives to note that we got going on, we'll talk a little bit to your item, Scott, about the M&O budget here. One thing to note about these other IT initiatives is that none of these were going on 2 months ago. They're all active right now. We're doing all of these things up on the screen right now. We're improving customer support. We've actually gone through a reorganization, which we're not quite through yet, but it's coming along in restructuring how customer support, desktop support is delivered to all of our employees in the county. I've been out and about circulating. I've talked to over half of the directors and deputies and assistants in all the departments out there, finding out how are we doing? How's IT doing? What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? Has anybody ever asked you these questions before? And I'm finding out that they've never really been asked these questions before. And what I really appreciate is everybody's giving me very honest answers. And we've had 6 departments that have been not at all happy with the service they've received from us. So in 90 days, less than 90 days now, I'll be returning and asking how we're doing now. And we're making some adjustments along the way, trying to provide a much higher level of customer support. One thing that, and just brought to my attention real quick, walking in here when we did with Ashley Callan and folks here, is that we have different groups of people that they need to be, what's the right word? They need prioritized, maybe not all the time, but there's certain times of the day when we need to be 100% available to their needs. In the mornings when courts all start up, we have all these courtrooms and they all have AV, they all have technology throughout them. And if a courtroom is down or a series is down and our techs are off site at Scraps or Geiger or wherever, and they're not available to help that, we're not providing a good service at all. So we're restructuring how our techs work when they are looking at prioritized departments and being available. Trying to make someone available for, board hearing meetings. Somebody's there to make sure that technology is good to go, at least at the start of the meeting, making sure this room is operable at the start. And finding out that we need to do those things is never fun because it's always a problem that brings that to our attention at times. So I'm trying to talk to everyone to get a scope of how are we doing, what can we do better. We do appreciate what you have to say. We want to really act on that. So that's one thing we're doing. To your point, Kara's laptop replacement planning, we have, hundreds, 900,000 Kara's laptops that we purchased in 2020. It's soon to be 2023. I don't know if these can even run Windows 11 full on. Windows 11 we have to have that implemented by 2025. So this is a huge thing that we have to get our heads wrapped around, create a plan for, and get support to implement it. And that's part of our M&O budget, is asking for that. Am I correct on that, Gary?
Yes.
Okay.
That's your M&O.
Yeah.
Each of these computers were purchased by the CARES. And one of the things that we came across, as you well learned too, is that we were supporting both desktop computers and laptops simultaneously. So we're doubling up on what we were supporting in terms of computers for each employee. And now we're going to work to reduce that duplicity, right? And then identify in a sequential manner how we would need to in future years replace those laptops predicated on what they can run and how they were spec'd. But since that was paid for CARES, the new iteration and the replacement for these things, now that we have docking stations and you can use them at your desktop too, as opposed to home, will then be part of what we need to pay for out of the county funds.
I ask, how many of those are being utilized daily? I mean, because we bought them because we wanted people to be teleworking. We can tell by our parking lots that a lot of people have returned to the office who probably have desktops. How many of those CARES purchase laptops are being utilized?
I would say a vast majority of them, 90% plus.
Okay.
They're being used. There's a lot of desktops that have gone away. Where we really see desktop usage is on applications that are old, like Ascend and ProVal in the assessor and treasurer's office, where our VPN capability isn't such that it can really work with those applications. They're that antiquated. That's why we need to replace them. But also, the laptops are being used because another thing and this, I give Tony Hall all the credit for this, we need to use Teams as our workplace. And you can use Teams as your workplace on your desk, on your laptop. You really can't do that on your desktop because you don't have a microphone, you don't have a camera. And so people are making use of those laptops.
Good, glad to hear that.
Yeah, they really are. And we're starting to see, hey, my laptop's getting slow. We're just starting to see those kind of things come about.
And Kevin, as you were talking about customer service, you know, and with the Superior Court in here, they were talking about wanting to have their own full-time IT person,
Oh,
similar to what
yeah,
district
very
court.
aware of that, yeah.
Yeah, similar to what district court does. And so, you know, so that was one of the questions was, are we looking to centralize or decentralize?
Centralize. You know, I love Wayne Miller. That's the person the district court has. He's great. But every department can have a Wayne Miller type on their staff that is somewhat technically savvy, that can be our liaison. They don't need a full-blown technical person to do that because they're very limited in those offices. They don't have, you know, they haven't signed the confidentiality agreement that allows them to get to literally everything that everyone in IT has signed. They don't have the capability to set permissions and things like that. So when Wayne Miller has things that are more than just superficial technical issues, he has to rely on our techs as well. I try to tell Ashley Cowan that a lot of the time, but you know, he can do maybe 30 to 40% of what a tech can do. A tech can take it all the way and make permission changes, do the updates to PCs and desktops if they have them, to the AV systems that they have there that Wayne Miller can't do. Not that Wayne Miller isn't valuable, he really is. He can create reports and things like that for them that they think are replacing something that a tech does. That just is a good person to have in a department that knows what they do business-wise and can really assist. But those people also assist us in a great manner, but not, it's different than having a tech on your staff. Very different than that. So yeah, we were trying to keep everybody back.
The other issue we have run into is they'll buy some equipment thinking it'll work, but it doesn't work with our systems. So there's kind of a lack of communication there, you know.
Part of our new cybersecurity policy indicates that all software, all hardware that is brought into the county or purchased needs to clear through IT to make sure that it works within our network, can be supported, all of those things. There are lots of products out there that we do not want to have any part of on our network, that be that either applications, hardware devices, a lot of different things, because they're not sustainable here and they're not a good fit for our network.
And they could be pathways for cyber
Absolutely.
attacks.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it used to be, you know, that's top and center nowadays. You can't ignore that anymore. So just because this might be the best cool thing, but if it doesn't, you know, meet some of our baseline security requirements, then it's just not worth the risk of putting it on our network.
When we had facilities come and talk about, you know, Johnson Controls, you know, in controlling, you know, the air handling and how that really works. And so just, you know, ensuring that they're working through you too, that it's gotta be.
Yeah, that's a unique system that Johnson Controls can manage that. And we need to separate out our IT network and what happens within the county away from that. And we've kind of, you know, when we've done a few things out there, there's been some concerns and questions, I think, to the degree that maybe they didn't need to be, but they were there. So we're working with Gil on those items.
And then the other one is elections with the election tabulation equipment in providing confidence to the citizens that it is not connected to the internet in any way,
It's
shape, or form.
absolutely separate.
So, so I don't know if that's something.
And that's an area our techs, I don't even think our techs can get into those areas at all. IT isn't allowed to work on any of that equipment. That's not us. That's definitely the elections department and the state manages all of that. Good points.
I was just gonna say something that popped into my head when we were talking about emails and retention of all that. When I used to work for the state legislature, we had I don't remember if it was on a 3-month, 6-month, or 9-month schedule, but essentially your email would purge, and as soon as you get to a certain date, anything older than, again, I don't remember if it was 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months, if you have moved it from your inbox into a folder, it was just gone. It was deleted off your, have we thought of doing something like that?
We would love that.
Love to do that.
I mean, why don't we?
Yes, we have.
This goes, not to interrupt you, but we've always kind of wanted, and there's other counties actually that say, hey, it's up to you to move that. And if you don't, then it's kind of your fault if that gets deleted.
Yeah.
But I think we as a county have kind of been adverse. We're kind of better safe than sorry. But what that means is we end up we have emails back to 1999, So I think we should find a middle ground somewhere in there, kind of put the onus back on the employee to move those records. But ultimately, I think, the county's on the hook though, if a records request
That's the problem.
can't be
is the
satisfied.
county's on the hook technically. And so if you have one person that moved something somewhere and on a BCC line, somebody else moved it somewhere else and one person gets deleted and another doesn't, or if it gets redacted differently, from a PRR perspective, we start walking into a scary territory. So Tony DeNaro has been working on this with legal. We're trying to figure out what's the best bet. Also, it takes a pretty considerable amount of training to help people understand what you should be saving, what you shouldn't be saving. So they're really trying to walk through kind of like, what does that training look like? How do we get it out in front of people? How do we help people be successful without putting ourselves in a situation where we now are not able to produce what we should be producing, or we're producing things that are different from one place to another. So we are working on it, but it's because we have so much stuff and because people have been doing this for so long, it's a pretty large scale project that they're looking at. Ken Moore, I believe, was helping, but Ken Moore's been repositioned to many other projects, ERP, law and justice. We are so thin on project managers, we have 2 for the whole county. So realistically, this slid down pretty far on the list of, because this is a whole county initiative if we do it. And so it's dropped down the list as compared to some of the much larger projects we have our PMs on right now. But it's something we recognize we need to look at. The other question then is, though, if we're dragging out of our email, are we clogging another server that might not be cloud-based? And so now we're adding more servers. So there's a lot of thought that has to go into this, I think, before we're ready to pull a trigger. But it is being looked at.
Other things, yearly technology fund replacement planning. We have always, asked for 400,000 a year, and that's just standard. Becky and Pat ask for that every year. And that's to replace technology for the general fund departments. And sometimes we need to do more than 400,000, sometimes we need to do less. So in that ask, in our budget, we're gonna be much more mindful about requesting what is really a more accurate number, instead of at the end of the year going, hey, guys, we have this money left over, what do you all need? That's not a good approach there, because there's other years that are just the opposite of that, where we get to this time of year and we've needed money for months to meet some of the demands that some of the general fund departments have. So we're looking at how we plan to make that better. Cloud-based disaster recovery backup, the Wasabi project that Andrew talked about, from initial conversation in September to launch earlier this month was less than a month, and we are backing up now daily. All of our county, all those 160 some terabytes of data is all in immutable storage. It's being backed up. We actually can back up to the cloud faster than we can back up to the backup center out in the valley. And what that means is we can eliminate our backup center out in the valley, take some of that hardware out there that's in really good usable shape and bring it back in and use it internally as well. Plus, maybe even add an additional, 3 or 4 weeks to our levels of backup internally and in the cloud. So, and that's with CARES money, we purchased for $1.4 million, something called a cyber vault that sits 8 feet away from our other backup units. And that's where our immutable backup storage is located now. This for 1 year costs $17,000. So this is a great solution. It's a great, from a standpoint of disaster recovery, this is the way we want to go. We spent 1 year, $17,000 to see if this was viable, if it would work well. It wouldn't be money, not well spent, because we had other uses we could have used this for, but What's really nice about Wasabi is that we pay for our storage and that's it. We don't pay for ingress, the moving of data to it, egress for pulling data out. It's just flat storage space that we have access to, we can set up and manage. So this has been a great thing and will save us literally millions of dollars over years to come. With getting, that's one thing that 3 months ago, I didn't know about this. And we've made a move here to enhance what we're doing in the cloud, and it's gonna pay off for us. Voice over IP phone via workspace deployment, we're moving forward on that. That's a really big thing to get people to be able to work from home and still have it look like they're sitting at their desk answering their county work phone that's hardwired into their desk location, or it doesn't have to be a desk location, it can just be a phone number for the hoteling situations like what Ashley's doing in HR right now. People can get that on their computer and answer it, on their laptop if they're using Teams as their workspace and using the Avaya Workplace application loaded, or on their phone. They can respond as if they're truly using their 477 prefix number to handle county business on any cell phone or on their computer, which makes working from anywhere a lot more feasible. And then last point here, cybersecurity grant funding. Homeland Security has put out that they have $1 billion+ available for Homeland Security. That breaks out to a specific amount for the state of Washington. I can't remember what that amount is. It's a very large number. But we are working with emergency management and with grants on what we can do. Our first deadline for making any kind of requests, requisitions is the end of this month. And I didn't find out before I came. My apologies as to where we're at with that, but we're pursuing that as well. Next slide. So just concluding, we're looking at software replacements and a lot of hardware replacements there. And we've identified on this slide in what year we're replacing what. There's a lot of detail here. We've covered, I believe, all of this. So, we can go into more detail here if we need to. We certainly don't have to if you don't want, if you don't have any questions. Are there any questions?
I think we asked a lot of questions as we were going.
I appreciate that too.
Yeah.
Hopefully that we didn't just talk over and didn't allow for questions. So if you come up with any other questions over, man, I should have asked that, just reach out to me or Sean or Andrew, any of us. We'll be glad to tell you anything you need to know. Also look for invitations. We want you to come over, see our data center, go back into the computer room, into our true data center, and you'll understand a lot more about switches and all the things that we talked about. For me, it made more sense, and I think it will for all of you as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you guys
Thank
for
you.
your time, appreciate it a lot.
I've got a hard 4 o'clock meeting, I've gotta be on Zoom. So.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good seeing you. Good to see you. How's your mom doing?
Piece of cake.
I just texted.
Sorry.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
We have.
Had to
You got me
reorient
by 4 years, but that's it.
We have Leslie's
You got me
animal.
by 4 years, but that's it.
Yeah, big table.
Yeah, I think of her every time I drive by.
Yeah, I know.
Cats and dogs.
There's not many of us left.
Holes in my case.
Yeah, wolves in your case.
Yeah, Sun Moon. I used to go to that restaurant all the
Oh,
time.
did you?
So
Oh,
nice.
nice.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Take care.
Good to see you.
Bye, thank you.
I know.
All right,
Okay.
very quick.
No, and I apologize, because I do have a 4 o'clock, I've got to be on Zoom, so Commissioner French will conclude the meeting for me
No problem.
So, because I don't want you to rush.
No problem. The important thing is, this is Jess Ferrari, he's our new scraps director. Super happy to have him on board. He's already been a huge blessing. I wish I had more for you than I do. We are still working with Gil and several people he's connected with us to get estimates for the capital projects we're looking at for scraps. I did talk with Gary earlier today. It's definitely going to be less than what was proposed. It says like 7 million, that's not what we're looking at. It'll probably be under $1 million for the whole building that we're looking at as an overflow facility, so that we can rotate animals out of spaces, get the deep cleans done that need to be done, and get the other, make sure we can do a quarterly maintenance that since we've been over capacity hasn't been able to be done appropriately. So then the other expenses on the capital project are remodeling / industrial cleaning. And those are, we're looking at a couple of different organizations. We've already done 2 rooms and it was about $19,000 for the 2 big rooms that we did. Some of the work is going to be a little bit more labor intensive, but we're looking at properly outfitting the facility so that it's meant for the purpose at hand, which is sheltering animals. And right now we've just got certain spaces that were never outfitted appropriately. They were more personnel space, office type spaces, don't have washable walls and things like that. And then also to reseal the concrete floors so that they can be maintained appropriately. So those are just some of the big ticket items. And we still don't have an estimate back on the flooring or the rest of the industrial cleaning that we're looking at. The overflow facility is probably the most important because we need that in order to do many of the other things. So.
I'm sorry, I was down the hall. What's the cost of the overflow facility? Do you have an estimate on that one?
We don't,
That would be
unfortunately.
not- okay.
Everything I've looked at, it should be under $1 million, but it just depends on how they have to look at all the specs, and it needs concrete and water and power, and so I don't have that yet. Gil's connected me to 2 other folks who are supposed to be getting that for us, but we don't have it yet.
Kind of looking at like a poll type.
Yes,
Yeah, like a
exactly.
full
Yeah,
building.
yeah, I remember when we spoke a few weeks ago, you explained sort of the concept.
Yeah. And that also gives us a good extra space for when we have seizures of some what we more farm animal type critters. Sometimes we have chickens and ducks and goats and horses. And so if we did a pole barn type building, it would give us more exterior spaces as well for those types of animals in the short interim while we're waiting to get them placed. So just make it a lot easier to facilitate.
So, now that, you've had a little bit of time, how are you feeling there? And now that you've got Jesse?
I'll let him speak to that since he is now boots on the ground every day. It is getting better, but
Because you've been there 2 weeks?
I think this is the 3rd week, I think, 3rd full
Okay.
week. So,
good.
definitely some room for improvement. Geez, without getting into it, I'm definitely optimistic. There's room to move forward. There's room to meet the needs of the community, the taxpayers, the animals, and the employees. I think they've been without leadership for long enough. There's some relief that there's somebody in the seat who's there every day, and who's listening to what they've got going on, their thoughts and ideas for the building. Like Kat said, some of the offices are housing some animals right now that maybe shouldn't be, just because of air vents and whatever else. I'm not sure.
yeah. So the big piece is that we didn't really have a capacity policy in place pre-COVID, and throughout COVID, we got a lot of intake. Our intake numbers really went up, and so, as most of you know, this used to be a Harley-Davidson showroom. So a lot of the areas in this facility weren't intended to be an animal sheltering space. And so you have some sheetrock that's been ruined, and you have some flooring that needs to be cleaned deeply and then resealed appropriately. There's also been some solvents that have been used that deteriorated the floor more, that I don't think they didn't know what they didn't know at the time. So, but Staffing wise, we're still struggling, we're getting there, but we've got a lot of positive things coming forward in that realm too. So the big thing is just getting some of this heavy lifting done as far as getting the facility cleaned and outfitted appropriately. And one of the things is we're not doing this blind. Jesse and I have been in contact with the National Association of Animal Control. We're getting examples of best practices from other successful nationally recognized shelters that are similar to us, municipal, regional. So we're getting some guidelines and some changes to policies and procedures that are going to put us in a better place down the road for sure. And to one, make sure we maintain the upkeep of the facility once we get it to where it needs to be, but as well as managing capacity and some of the other pieces that directly impact that. So hopefully, like we did in vet services, getting some of those nationally recognized best practices in play at our scraps facility will make a big difference moving forward.
Well, and I guess one of the questions, Scott and I talked about this, earlier today, but just, what are the policies and procedures that were in place, ahead of the latest director? And then, are those part of the operating agreements that we have with the other municipalities? Because I think some of that, was one, then making sure of what the type of shelter it was, it is, and all of that. And so making sure that just because one person wanted to maybe change it, that isn't up to that one person. That's actually up to the LA, the interlocal agreement.
Correct.
And the commissioners.
Correct.
And so trying to see what happened, where we're at and where we need to be, and then how are the animals doing?
I could definitely fill you in a lot more on that offline if you'd like. There's a lot of material there. But
are we back to meeting the policies or what the intent of the interlocal agreement is?
So yes, absolutely. And we're also re-looking at some of our contractual obligations because so much has changed that they don't make sense right now. And so we have several contracts that are expired that we're going to be in the process of renegotiating. And we're going to be very careful about how we do that because a lot of the times they haven't properly reflected the amount of work that's being done on behalf of whatever that particular entity is. So we're going to be looking at that too. We have several expired contracts that I'm going to pick Mike's brain. He's going to help me with that.
So was there billing issues then too along the way
Say again?
Were there billing issues where billings weren't occurring?
No, actually the gal who's doing the billing is doing a fantastic job. She's done a really good job making sure that even though the contracts are expired, the billing has gone on. And to their credit, everyone is still paying. We don't have an issue with the folks paying on their current contracts, but the contracts are expired and we should probably really look at what our actual costs are versus what we're billing for.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity for us to really look at the operations, what it takes to run this, and make sure that we're doing good cost recovery on it. Not only just for the operations, but for future capital needs as well. And I think this has been in place for quite a few years and needs a refresh, not only in terms of the facility, but in terms of the contracts and what's being done. And like anything, you go on for many years and you start to have a little scope creep, and you got to kind of bring that back together, make sure that we're consistent in it, and it's a self-sustaining operation, and it's not right now.
I do believe that it can be again, though. I firmly believe we can be in a place where we could be self-sustaining again. I just think there's some investments we need to make to prioritize modeling some of those best practices that are working in other places, Part of the problem was a lot of changes were made that were not put in, necessarily policy updates, but there were a lot of changes made on the fly that started having unintended consequences, I guess you could say.
So once you get some better ideas of some numbers, you'll be back in
Yeah.
and adjusting the CIP plan
Yeah.
with Tessa.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't want to guess. I'm not a construction professional.
Yep.
I don't know what those things would look like, so I try to let Gary know ahead of time. We just don't have that yet, but we will get harder numbers for you. And it's not my goal to to even hit 5 million. I'd really like to be able to keep our expenses as low as we can. And we can project it out too. Not everything has to be done all at once, obviously.
Speaking on that, on a timeline basis, could you lead me through the sequence of what has to happen first as it relates to the construction of a pole building versus what you can accomplish now internally with the renovation of the interior and the flooring?
Well, unfortunately, until we can move animals out,
You can't do any of
we
that.
can't do most of the other things. There are some spaces that we can work on, like we did the community room and the conference room because there aren't animals there, right? But there's certain rooms that are animal quarantine spaces, those types of things. There's nowhere to move the animals to in order to get that work done.
So have you looked until a pole building can be built, and I don't know how long it would take for the construction, any kind of temporary storage so that you can start sequencing some of the work inside?
That has been suggested. I haven't found any solutions there yet. I know that there's a lot of modular, units and things that you could do to potentially, but then you have issues of it's getting cold, how are you gonna heat it? How do you get water out there? Those kinds of things. So it's a tough one. So.
Okay, anything else for board's information?
I think so. I'm really glad to have Jess on board.
Okay, so very good.
Yeah.
So I think that completes all of the business coming before the board.
It does.
So it is now 3:57. And we are adjourned. Oh, no. No, we are continuing this.
Nope, we're not.
We already continued this morning.
No,
We ended it.
change it, did not continue it.
We're not going to continue it. Are we meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30? We are not. So I should not show up.
I mean, you could show up. You just might be the only one there.
All right, so we're adjourned. Thanks.
Just
So what
for your
changed?
edit.